Menki is an office worker living her boring life on a normal boring day, with superheroes fighting a boring tentacle monster right outside her window. This is a world where humanity has begun expanding their civilization into, and with the help of their pioneering heroes, they have succeeded in developing a new world. However, the people do still need to deal with the occasional tentacle monster here and there, which is where the hero agency comes into play. Normally, the people in this office would need to evacuate since the monster fight is happening next door, but at this point, none of them really care enough to run away, so it's pretty much if I die, then I die. In fact, Menki over there is still hard at work filling out a report, completely ignoring the monster out the window, and her boss loves her work ethic so much that he comes over to give her even more work to do. Meanwhile, Menki's coworkers are all gossiping about a rumor they heard that the company hired a humanoid robot recently, but the boss comes over and tells them to get back to work because he's not paying them to waste company time. Menki happened to overhear the rumor, but she doesn't think it really matters because whether it's a human, a humanoid robot, or even an alien, it doesn't change the fact that she's going to be stuck working at this office for the rest of her life. Meanwhile, right outside, the hero captain, Raymond, is getting ready to finish off the tentacle monster, but as he does so, the villain who was behind the whole attack gets sent flying into Menki's building, and he seems to be holding a bomb, so maybe she should have evacuated after all. Fortunately, before the bomb could go off, one of the heroes jumps in and kicks it out of the building just in time to save everyone inside. He also catches Menki before she could fall, but in the process, a green blob emerges from the necklace he was wearing and flies straight into Menki's head, and let me tell you, that was not a good thing. Menki passes out, so Yasin drags her to a nearby storage closet, and no matter how he looks at this, he's cooked. For now, he decides to get Menki to wake up, so he finds an adrenaline shot and stabs her with it to get the blood pumping again. Menki wakes up and is in shock because she feels like she just died, but Yasin clarifies that she didn't die, it was just a mild case of her heart stopping out of nowhere. That doesn't sound very mild to her, but that's the least of her problems because Yasin explains to her the green blob that flew into her head was actually an alien parasite, and it's worse than the shit going on in The Last of Us. Basically, it eats away at the host's brain until it takes full control of the body, and the only way to keep it at bay is to maintain high mental stimulation at all times. Which basically means, if Menki becomes bored, the parasite is going to eat her brain until she dies. Yasin tries remaining optimistic and tells her that as long as she does exciting stuff, she should be fine for the meantime. But that's a bit of a problem because she works at the most boring job imaginable, so she decides to just accept her fate and lays down to let the parasite do its thing. Yasin begins panicking and tells her not to give up because he's going to do whatever to make sure she stays alive. Menki doesn't understand why a hero like Yasin is willing to go so far to help her, and at first, you'd think he likes her or something, but no, it's just that if Menki dies, it will affect his performance metrics and he'd lose all his hero perks, so he wants to avoid that at all costs. However, listening to Yasin ramble on and on about the hero handbook makes Menki really bored, so the parasite gets a chance to start turning her brain into a smoothie, and all of a sudden, blood starts shooting out of her nose. Several minutes later, Menki wakes up and she is horrified when she takes a look at the room, because there's more blood in here than in one of Jigsaw's traps. She then spots the first aid kit on the floor, and apparently, Yasin performs some impromptu life-saving surgery to make sure Menki wouldn't die, but he warns her to be careful, because if another blood geyser happens, he won't be able to save her again. But then he remembers that it's kind of his fault that she's in this mess to begin with, so he apologizes for his mistake. He tells her that there's still hope for her survival because as long as she avoids being bored, she can live long enough for a cure to be found. But for her, that's a lot easier said than done. Her job is so mind-numbing that she'd have better luck watching paint dry to stay entertained, but Yasin encouraged her to do her best and starts giving a long motivational speech. However, Menki doesn't want to hear it from an exciting superhero like him. She asks Yasin if he'd be willing to swap lives with her if he's so invested in keeping her alive, since becoming a superhero like him is the only way she'd be able to avoid boredom long enough to survive. However, Yasin remains silent, and Menki sighs because she already assumed that Yasin was just bluffing when he said he wanted to help her. She heads for the door so she can return to her boring life. However, before she could leave, Yasin stops her and says he's willing to give her idea a shot. He will help her become a superhero until they can find a cure for the parasite, but even though he genuinely wants to help her, he's not exactly sure how to turn Menki into a hero. Just then, they hear a scream coming from the main room, so they rush out to see what's going on, and to their surprise, they discover that the villain has taken everyone hostage and is holding them at laser gunpoint. But there's still one lady in the back typing away at her computer because she couldn't care less about her life being threatened. Once the villain notices Yasin and Menki, he starts firing at them, forcing Yasin to drag Menki to safety before running out to deal with the grate. He manages to dodge the laser and knock the gun out of the villain's hands, after which he attempts to knock the villain out. But even though the dude looks like this is his first time seeing the sun in years, he actually knows how to run a fade. That said, Yasin is still stronger than him, so to gain the upper hand, he decides to target Menki as a distraction. And it goes exactly as planned because Yasin sacrificed himself and took a laser to the back to protect her. He tells Menki to run away while she still can, but she already decided that she wants to be a hero from now on. So instead, she confronts the villain and tries to find out what he wants. She asks him if he's here for money or revenge, but the villain simply tells her he's there to take out the AI robot that was recently employed by this company. Menki is a little stunned since she wasn't expecting an answer like that, and all the coworkers start murmuring amongst themselves because they'd be more than willing to hand over the robot to save their lives. Yasin tells everyone to be careful because the villain may be trying to trick them into lowering their guard, but no, he really is just a clanker hater. Menki asks if the villain will leave them alone as long as they hand over the robot, and he agrees, but he says he's not sure which one of them is the robot since they look identical to regular humans. Everyone immediately points their fingers at Menki, and they all accuse her of being the robot. After all, they've never seen her show facial expressions while working or join in on the office gossip before, and it definitely couldn't be the lady who has been typing this entire time, so it must be Menki. Menki tries to point out that the typing lady hasn't looked up from her computer this entire time, but the lady just sends a meme in the group chat that says, "I'm not a robot, LOL." And that's good enough for all her coworkers. Menki still insists that she's not the robot, but the villain points his laser at her and threatens to blow her head off unless she can prove that she's not a robot. Yasin gets in front of the villain and swears that Menki is not a robot, and he knows this because the parasite in her head can only attack organic beings, plus she did shoot out a ton of blood earlier. So she's definitely human, but he is still trying to keep that a secret, so he can't provide any proof that Menki is a human. All of a sudden, the boss steps forward and tells everyone that he is certain that Menki isn't the robot, and he knows this because he himself is the android that the company employed. Everyone is so shocked by this development that they don't know what to say, but one of Menki's coworkers thinks the boss is just trying to sacrifice himself in order to save Menki, and she is so moved that she offers herself up as well and claims to be a robot. All the other workers do the same and pile onto the villain, and to be honest, if they can do this, then they could have just jumped him when he first attacked. The boss is caught off guard by the behavior of his employees because he wasn't really trying to be heroic or anything. He really is the robot that the company hired. But by this point, no one is listening to him anymore. Yasin is relieved that the villain has been restrained, so all that's left is to take him into custody and return to base, but all of a sudden, the boss tackles the villain off the edge of the building for absolutely no reason. And normally, this wouldn't really matter, but before the villain falls to his doom, he managed to grab onto Menki's shirt, pulling her down with him, so in turn, Yasin was forced to dive down after her. And he's got that stone-faced expression the entire time because he really doesn't want to be doing this. Mainly because he can't fly, but he does have enhanced strength, so he pushes himself down to the ground first and opens his arms to catch Menki. However, he ended up messing up the timing, so Menki goes splat on the pavement. Two things to note here. It turns out that the boss really was an android, and Menki is still alive because the villain's body broke her fall, but she does have severe internal bleeding right now, so Yasin should probably get her to a hospital soon. Meanwhile, the office ladies see the boss's shattered robot body, and they are devastated to find out that he really was a robot since they were low-key hoping the boss would pipe them down one day because he was hot. As for Menki, it turns out that waiting to be taken to the hospital while most of your bones are broken is pretty boring, so the parasite takes effect again, and she starts shooting blood everywhere again. A few weeks go by and Menki is at home being taken care of by Yasin, and so far, he has provided everything she could ever ask for, whether it be a steak meal, a new video game, or a premium Netflix subscription. But all this work is starting to wear Yasin out. Her injuries have mostly healed, so he asks her when she plans to go back to work, but Menki flatly refuses and tells him she's not going back to work because she doesn't want to. She reminds Yasin that it's his fault that she got infected with a parasite, so it's his responsibility to take care of her until they find a cure. Yasin can't really argue with that, but he has to go do work stuff now, so he tells Menki to take care of herself until he gets back, and the first thing she does once he's gone is call her office to resign from her position. Her entire life, she has been working like an ant in an ant farm, and she doesn't want to keep going like this, so even if she has to mooch off Yasin for the foreseeable future, she's going to take advantage of the opportunity the universe provided her with. However, as she's riding the elevator up to the HR department so she can resign, she notices a window cleaner outside who looks an awful lot like Yasin, and yeah, it really is Yasin. She gets off the elevator on the next floor while Yasin climbs in through one of the windows, and as soon as they meet, they both ask what the other is doing here. Yasin doesn't understand why Menki is at the office because she already told him she's too bored to work today, and Menki doesn't understand why he's here when he told her he had to go to work. Yasin tells her that he doesn't make much money as a superhero, so he had to take a part-time job to cover his expenses, and Menki is shocked to hear this because she thought Yasin was loaded. And if he's really that broke, then she asks him how he managed to pay for her medical and entertainment expenses while she was injured, but that's when Yasin tells her that he has actually been using her savings to pay for all her recent expenses, and hearing that instantly sends a shiver down her spine. She opens her bank app to check her account balance, and just like the number of girls I've talked to this year, it's a big fat zero. She immediately starts having visions of all the bills she has to pay with no money now, and all of a sudden, dying doesn't seem like such a bad option anymore. Just then, the HR guy shows up and asks Menki if she still wants to resign, and at this point, she doesn't really care anymore, so she's about to go through with the resignation, but Yasin stops her because if she doesn't keep her job, she's going to end up starving to death sooner or later, especially now that she has no savings. This situation looks odd, but the HR guy doesn't really care what Menki has going on, so he just asks her if she plans to quit or not. Yasin eventually convinces her to keep her job, so she's going to have to keep working, but she can already feel the boredom creeping up on her. Yasin tells her he can't provide her with money, but he's willing to do anything to keep her from feeling bored, and Menki decides to take him up on that offer. So she asks him to at least let her experience what it's like to live the life of a superhero for a day. Yasin agrees as long as it will get her to go back to work, so he tells her to get on his back as he jumps off the roof. At first, Menki is really enjoying the feeling of flying, but then she remembers that Yasin doesn't actually fly, and jumping across rooftops is a lot less comfortable than she imagined it to be. Furthermore, she's starting to realize that Yasin's life may actually be worse than hers because he has to work a bunch of part-time jobs, and this isn't fun at all, especially the toilet clog job. By lunchtime, Menki is fed up and asks why Yasin is working at jobs like this, even though he has superpowers, but he tells her that his next job requires him to use his superpower, so she should find it a little more interesting. Menki keeps her hopes up, but it turns out that the job Yasin was talking about was just construction, and by the end of the day, they are both exhausted, but the only thing Menki managed to learn about Yasin is that he's broker than she is. Yasin says he's glad she understands his situation now, and on that note, he says he'd like to move into her apartment since he will be taking care of her anyway, and he also doesn't want to have to pay rent anymore. Before Menki even gets a chance to respond, Yasin has already moved all his stuff in, and a few minutes later, he's ready to go to sleep on the couch, but Menki isn't satisfied. She thinks there's no way a superhero could really live like this, but Yasin tells her she's overestimating how lucrative hero work really is, so he needs to do what he can to make ends meet. If that's the case, then Menki asks why all the heroes on TV seem so rich, but Yasin explains that those guys are the exception, and that not all heroes get to be rich and famous like them. Menki now realizes that Yasin's life is a lot harder than she thought, which makes her feel bad about trying to take advantage of him, so she agrees to let him move in and says goodnight before going to bed. However, later that night, Yasin sneaks into her room with a briefcase and some defibrillators because the brain parasite is still a major concern, even when Menki is asleep, so he stands over her the entire night, and whenever she looks like she's having a boring dream, he shocks her head to stimulate her brain. By morning, Menki wakes up, and she notices that she feels unusually tired for some reason, but that's nothing compared to Yasin, because he looks like he's been up all night. Menki isn't sure what happened to Yasin, but she thanks him for preparing breakfast for her, and afterwards, she gets dressed for work. Yasin is a bit surprised since he thought she would want to join his daily life again today, but compared to what Yasin goes through, her office job is much easier, so she says she will do her best to avoid getting bored at work. Yasin is relieved to hear that Menki is willing to go back to work, but he's still got a few things he needs to take care of, so as soon as she's gone, he jumps off the balcony. Later that day, he heads to Hero HQ to search the database for any known cures for the parasite, but unfortunately, he doesn't have high enough security clearance for that information, so it's a dead end. The only other option he has now is to go meet his boss to ask what he should do. Meanwhile, Menki's back at her desk in the office, and she's doing her best to keep her mind entertained, but she can't keep herself from thinking, damn, this shit is boring. Back to Yasin, he finally gets to meet with his boss, but the second he asks what would happen if a civilian ended up dying as a result of a recent hero mission, his boss loses it. He starts yelling and firing off lasers as he demands to know which stupid hero killed his civilian. But Yasin quickly backpedals and says he was only asking hypothetically because there's no way he'd ever be reckless enough to put a civilian's life at risk. Now, he knows he can't just come clean about the whole situation, but if he's going to keep Menki's condition a secret and keep her alive long enough to find a cure, then he will need a lot more money. That's why he decides to take on some high-level hero missions to earn some quick cash, but the jobs here seem pretty difficult. Just then, one of Yasin's buddies, Gray, comes over and finds him staring at a 5-star mission, which is surprising to him because he knows Yasin usually only handles 2 or 3 stars at most, so he wonders why he is suddenly taking such risks. Yasin explains that he needs extra money because he needs to take care of a girl, and as soon as he hears this, Gray assumes that Yasin must have gotten himself a girlfriend, but Yasin tells him it's a long story. Gray offers to assist him with the 5-star mission since he looks like he could use the help. However, the mission ends in horrible failure, and by the end of the day, Yasin is badly injured and covered in monster blood, so Gray helps him get home. However, as they approach the door, Gray realizes that this place belongs to a civilian, and he assumes it must be the new girlfriend that Yasin doesn't want to tell him about, so he's excited to see what she looks like. However, as he opens the door, what he sees is pretty disappointing. He finds Menki sprawled over the couch, stuffing her face with chips and playing video games. After seeing Yasin in his injured state, she casually tells him to lie on the floor if he needs to rest because she doesn't want him staining her couch with alien blood. But this rubs Gray the wrong way because Yasin was out there taking on dangerous missions so he could provide for Menki, yet she doesn't seem grateful at all. He has no idea about the Parasite, or why Yasin is so committed to taking care of Menki, so he thinks this must be an abusive relationship and warns Yasin to back out before it's too late. All of a sudden, Menki gets up, and for a second, Gray thinks she had a change of heart and wants to help Yasin after all, but then she casually steps over Yasin's head and walks into her bedroom. He starts yelling that she's heartless, but all the noise is giving Yasin a headache, so he asks Gray to go home for now, and he will explain everything the next time they meet. Yasin then collapses next to the door, but to his surprise, a moment later, Menki returns with a first aid box, so she really does intend to help him. She starts patching him up as best she can, but his injuries are more than she's prepared to handle, so she tells Yasin that he should really go to a hospital soon. However, Yasin tells her that he has a healing factor, so as long as she can stop the bleeding, he will be fine after a good night's sleep. After saying that, he promptly passes out, so Menki finishes cleaning him and patching up his wounds. She can't say she's happy about being infected with a parasite, but her life has become a lot more exciting since she met Yasin, and for better or worse, she thinks that's a good thing. Though the parasite thing does really suck, she's starting to suffer symptoms again, so she heads to the bathroom to deal with the nosebleed. A little while later, Yasin regains consciousness and finds Menki in the bathroom, so he hands her a towel and apologizes again for the mess he caused. Menki tells him she has already decided to stay at her job, so he doesn't need to keep taking dangerous jobs to provide for her, and she doesn't really blame him for what happened since she knows it was an accident, so they'll just have to handle the parasite together until they can get rid of it. Just then, Yasin gets a message on his phone, and it gives him a great idea, so he grabs Menki and tells her he just found a good way to alleviate her boredom. He picks her up and jumps out the window so he can take Menki to an active battle zone where some top-tier heroes are currently fighting an alien. And Menki is loving it because this is the kind of superhero excitement she was hoping for. However, a little while later it's not so fun anymore because she hadn't realized that Yasin arranged for her to be part of the hero squad fighting the aliens. Yasin asks her if she likes his gift, and she's absolutely terrified, but since there's no backing out now, so she jumps over a log to get some covers. Unfortunately, sitting at a desk for 8 hours a day doesn't exactly boost your agility, so she ends up hitting the ground hard and has to scoot over behind the tree trunk. Yasin soon joins her, and she admits that she told Yasin that she wanted to experience life as a superhero, but this isn't exactly what she meant. However, Yasin looks like he put a lot of effort into this, and she wants to at least give it a fair shot, so she scopes in with the gun he gave her and prepares to fire at the alien. However, before she could take the shot, Yasin jumps out and yells fire, which startles Menki and gives their position away to the monster. Now it's heading this way, so Menki prepares herself and opens fire on the alien, and it looks like she's having a lot of fun. But before she could destroy it completely, the alien uses one of its arms to strike at her, so Menki is forced to jump out of the way. All of a sudden, this isn't so fun anymore. She starts running around as she tries to avoid getting squashed until the alien eventually grabs her by her jacket and throws her into the air. As Menki falls to her doom, she finally realizes that being a superhero is a lot tougher than she thought it would be, and she really doesn't want to fight this thing anymore. But Yasin encourages her not to give up and reminds her that she can still use the bomb he gave her. Menki reaches into her jacket and tosses the bomb at the alien, and at the same time, Yasin jumps into the air to save Menki because they can't afford another hospital bill. By the time he gets her back to the ground, the bomb goes off and Yasin praises Menki for successfully taking down the monster. She is incredibly happy about her triumph, and Yasin is glad that she enjoyed the experience. But in reality, the alien was just a robot that he asked Gray to pilot since he couldn't risk putting Menki in any actual danger. Meanwhile, the other heroes are busy dealing with all the actual aliens, and Charles over here is annoyed because he's going to have to work overtime to get rid of all the monsters here. The next day, Menki is lying on her couch as usual when Yasin suddenly comes over and tells her they made it into today's newspaper. An article was written about the monster hunt yesterday, and he shows her a picture that was taken there, but Menki doesn't see herself anywhere. That's when Yasin tells her to zoom into the background, and sure enough, Yasin and Menki are in the picture as well, just very, very deep in the background. Even if they were barely acknowledged in the article, having her picture there is still a win for her, so she's really proud of herself. Yasin informs her that there's a similar job coming up soon and asks if she'd like to come with him again, but Menki slinks away and tells him she's gonna have to pass on that one. She takes back what she said about wanting to live the life of a hero and explains that what she really meant is that she wants to be free to do the things she enjoys and preferably without having to endanger her life. In that case, Yasin says he will go ahead and cancel their participation, but in reality, he never signed up for the job in the first place. He knew Menki would be too scared to go back once she found out how dangerous hero work really is, and now she won't bother him about it anymore. Just then, Yasin receives a message on his cracked phone that he can't afford to fix, and it's from Gray telling him that Menki's office is currently handing out boxes of fruit for the holidays, and since he works as a cleaner there, he's entitled to some as well, so he had better hurry up and get there before it runs out. A little while later, Yasin is happily carrying his box of fruit and is getting ready to head home and share it with Menki, but as he's walking through the halls, he happens to pass a few of Menki's coworkers, and one of them is concerned because Menki hasn't been coming to work lately. But then again, it makes sense since they recall seeing a lot of blood shooting out from her nose the last time she was here, so they think it's good that she's taking some time off to rest. But overhearing their conversation makes Yasin feel a little guilty because he knows he is the reason Menki is sick. He eventually returns to Menki's apartment, and as he enters, he finds her in the middle of hanging a picture in the living room. Once she notices him, she calls Yasin over to have a look, and to his surprise, he finds out that it's a zoomed-in picture of them from the monster hunt, and she wanted to hang it up to commemorate the fun moment shared with a friend. Menki may not be able to live her life normally anymore, but she's still really enjoying her time with Yasin, so she doesn't think it's all bad. The next day, Menki wakes up bright and early in the morning, and she's feeling great, so she decides to get ready and head out to work without being pestered, which is really out of character for her, but Yasin is glad that Menki is feeling motivated again. We then cut to Menki out in the city, and she has just bought herself some breakfast from the convenience store, and her social battery is still full, but as she's about to leave, a car zooms past her and messes up her hair, instantly taking her down to 80%. Then one crowded train ride later, Menki's battery is already down to 10%, and to make matters worse, she lost her breakfast somewhere in there, so all the motivation she had before is completely gone. A few moments later, Yasin arrives to provide moral support, but she's really not in the mood for that right now. She eventually drags herself up to her desk in the office, but as soon as she turns on the computer, she is hit with a notification saying she has 1,000 pending tasks to finish, and her bald-headed boss insists that she gets it all done as soon as possible. The HR guy also tells her that she has a lot of meetings to attend to, and a random coworker that she has never spoken to before suddenly announces that she's getting married, and she expects Menki to give her a cash gift even though they aren't friends. To make it all worse, she's assigned a new intern who is so dumb that he genuinely believes Gojo could beat Goku. Menki nearly loses her shit and crashes out right there, but Yasin shows up to calm her down, so she decides to hold her anger in. But things just keep getting worse from there, and before long, Menki's battery hits 0, so she officially has 0 Fs left to give. She doesn't want to waste another second with all this office politics BS, so she locks in and finishes all 1,000 tasks insanely quickly, and once she's done, she drops them all off on the boss's desk and tells him she's going home now since she's done with her work for the day. Her boss is stunned, and as she is walking away, he demands an explanation because he doesn't believe that Menki could really have finished a month's worth of piled-up work in one day. Menki tells him it doesn't matter how she did it as long as the work is done, so he should just leave her alone already. But a moment later, the HR guy comes over and asks her if the meeting room is ready yet, but she smacks him across the face and says that's not part of her job, so he should get someone else to do it. The random coworker then comes over and Menki smacks her across the face too, along with everyone else in the office who is being annoying. The HR guy is about to start complaining about Menki's behavior, but the boss tells him to hold on a minute because he's looking through all the work Menki did, and she actually handled it all perfectly. So the KPIs for this month are good to be through the roof. Just then, two men in suits enter the room and announce to everyone that they are here from HQ on important business, but Menki couldn't care less what they are here for. So she tells them to move aside before they end up like the rest of the people she smacked. The suit guys have no idea why she's so mad, but they are smart enough not to mess with her, so they let her pass, and once she's gone, they announce that they were informed that the AI robot that was assigned here was recently destroyed, so they are here to deliver a replacement. Kun 2.0 then introduces himself, and all the girls are overjoyed because their hopes of getting piped down by him are still alive. But Kun has no idea who any of them are since his memory backups were lost. The people in the office are generally glad that Kun has returned, but Menki doesn't seem all too thrilled about it, and Yasin can tell that something is wrong. Later that night, Yasin returns home and he is surprised to see that Menki isn't sprawled over the couch as usual. He sees the lights on in her room, so he knocks on the door and asks what she'd like to have for dinner, but Menki tells him she's skipping dinner tonight, so he should leave her alone. Yasin remains persistent and knocks on the door until she finally opens up, and he tells her to at least have a Coke to drink, but Menki declines the offer and asks him to leave her alone because she has a lot of work to do. However, the thought of Menki voluntarily doing work outside the office instantly makes Yasin worry that something may be seriously wrong, so after she has gone to sleep, he sneaks into her room to make sure the parasite hasn't changed Menki's personality somehow. After running some tests, everything seems to be normal, so Yasin isn't sure what the problem is. But just then, Menki wakes up, and she starts freaking out when she sees Yasin next to her. She demands to know what he's doing in her room, but Yasin covers her mouth and pushes her down, telling her to be quiet because there's someone else in the house. At first, she thinks he's just making stuff up, but all of a sudden, knockout gas starts pouring in from under the door, so there really is an intruder here. Yasin quickly hands Menki an oxygen mask and tells her to play along, so she lies down in bed, and a few moments later, the intruder walks into the room. He expects Menki to be out cold, so he starts walking over to her. But all of a sudden, Yasin jumps out from behind the curtains and nearly takes the guy's head off. Now that the first guy has been taken care of, Yasin grabs Menki and prepares to fight off any other intruders that may be here. But as soon as he steps outside, he realizes that there are way more agents than he thought there would be, and if he tried to fight them, he would definitely get his ass jumped. So he decides to do the smart thing and jumps out the window with Menki. Yasin eventually stops in a random alleyway, and now that they are safe, Menki demands answers. She asks him who those men were, but Yasin says he has no idea because he has never seen any of them in his life before. She then asks him why he was in her room when she woke up, and Yasin quickly tells her that the parasite sometimes takes effect while she's asleep, and when that happens, he needs to be next to her so he can manage the symptoms. Menki calms down after hearing this because while it's still a little weird that he was sneaking into her room without telling her, he was doing it to keep her safe, so she can't be too upset about it. For now, she suggests they should head back to the apartment since the agents should be gone by now, and Yasin agrees. Once they get back, the agents are indeed gone, but Menki soon realizes that they took the box under her bed, and she was worried that something like this might happen. Yasin asks what she means by that, so she tells him that the agents were here because of her. At the same time, we see the agents transporting the box they got from Menki's room, and it contains the head of the original Kun robot, which is what they were after in the first place. Yasin asks her why she kept something like that under her bed, but Menki says it's not her fault. She was taken to the hospital with it, and she later found out that it could do all her work with incredible efficiency, so she kind of thought it would be a good idea to keep it around to make her life easier. Yasin can't exactly argue with that, but he's pissed that Menki knew that was what the agents were here for and didn't tell him until now. By the end of it, Yasin decides to spend the night in Menki's room in case the agents come back, but after all the trouble she caused, he makes her sleep on the floor while he gets the bed. Menki knows she deserves this, but she pleads with Yasin to help her get the robot head back, because without it, she's going to need to go back to doing work normally, and that would be life-threateningly boring. Yasin ends up agreeing to help, so the two sneak into the office that night and break into the server room to find the new version of Kun's charging station. They have no way of tracking down the original head now that the agents have taken it, but with the chip from this version, they should be able to locate the base of the robot company. However, While Yasin is trying it, triangulate the base's position. Knockout gas begins to pour in from the vents, and Menki is knocked out cold. Yasin doesn't notice at first since his powers make him immune to the gas, but then someone appears through the window, and it's a blonde guy who seems to be in charge of the agents. Yasin wastes no time and grabs the dude by the throat before threatening to snap his neck if he doesn't let him and Menke go. But the guy threatens to reveal Yasin's secret if he doesn't calm down. Yasin can't let anyone find out about what happened to Menki, so he backs off and asks what the blonde guy wants. This was the end of episode 3. Subscribe to not miss the next part.